Hey everybody, and welcome to your first hand-drawn notes assignment. So this is a guided note-taking activity that also offers opportunity to practice concepts while you're taking notes. So whenever you have a hand-drawn notes assignment, you should write down everything I write down. This is also a great way to practice your note-taking skills. Sometimes hand-drawn notes assignments are graded, like today. Sometimes they're not. But even if they are not graded, the notes you take in these assignments will be important to help you in the next assignment. So always check your rubric to be sure if you're required to submit a hand-drawn notes assignment or not. Today's hand-drawn notes is about the requirements of living things. So this hand-drawn notes will close out the sub-module on characteristics of living things. So pause the video anytime if you need more time to copy things down. Grab your notebook and something to write with, and let's get to it. Okay, so did you watch the Mars rover landing from a couple of weeks back? So I want to know if you think that there is life elsewhere in the universe. Take a minute and jot down your answer, why or why not. Just write it in here or next to the question. Okay, about 30 more seconds. Do you think there is life elsewhere? Why or why not? Okay, that's your minute. So there's a field of science called astrobiology. Have you heard of this? Astrobiology is the study of the origin, evolution, distribution, and future of life in the universe. And astrobiologists are always studying ways to look for life on other planets and other moons. And in order to do that, they need to have an understanding of the nature of life, like what causes a thing to be alive. So my next question for you is, how do you know something is alive? Think back to what you've learned about the characteristics of living things and write down what you remember. Take 1 minute. So just make a list under here. How do you know something is alive? Let's see what you put. Okay, you have about 30 more seconds. Okay, that's your minute. So in order for something to be alive, it must have those 7 traits, characteristics of living things that we talked about in the mini lecture. And what are they? So we know that a living thing must be made of cells, and it must be able to grow and develop. It must be able to adapt to its environment. It must be able to respond to stimuli. It must be able to process energy. It must be able to maintain homeostasis. And finally, it has to be able to reproduce. Did you have these things on the list that you made? How many of them did you get? How'd you do? So these are the 7 absolute characteristics of living things. Now let's talk about conditions for life. So one of the things the Mars exploration team keeps doing is sending rovers to Mars and collecting samples to see what resources are available on the planet. And if those resources, either they are currently or there previously, would support or would have supported life as we know it. So the next thing I want us to think about is under what conditions for life can an organism exist? So think about what humans need to survive and make a list, right? What are the conditions for life? Just write them down here. I'll give you a first one as a hint. A moderate or defined temperature range, right? If it gets too cold, humans will die. Animals will die. Too hot, animals will die. So we need to exist within a certain range of temperatures. All right, so I've set my timer for a minute. Try to come up with at least 3 more things. So these are conditions for life. We already talked about the characteristics, the traits that all living things have in common. But now what are the conditions, right? The environmental conditions necessary to maintain life. Okay, just like 5 more seconds. All right, what else did you have on your list other than narrow temperature range? We also need water. We need food. We need sunlight. So many horror movies about people that had to live in places with no sunlight. Oxygen, that's an important one. In food, I should put nutrients, right? It doesn't always have to look like food. Food is the delivery method for these nutrients. We need a neutral, kind of a neutral pH. So not acidic, not basic. Did you come up with any other things than these? So let's rename this list conditions for, let's rename this list conditions for familiar life. And then okay. So now I want us to, if we're thinking especially in the context of Mars, just to keep the theme going, let's think about more extreme conditions. So think of very, very cold places, like the part of Antarctica that nobody goes to, or very hot places, not like the desert. I mean, that's an extremely hot place, but we know people can live there. But like hot springs or those vents, right? Those that are under the ocean that are piped right into the center of the earth. Or caves where there's no light and little oxygen, or underwater caves where it's completely filled with water. So let's try to put together a list of conditions for, I should have erased some. I'm sorry, my handwriting is terrible. It's worse than it usually is on this thing. Conditions for, and this time we're going to talk about extreme life. So take 1 minute and jot down, you can think about like life, things that are living on other planets or something. Think about conditions for extreme life. Take 1 minute and jot down what extremophiles might need. Actually, just take 30 seconds because we don't know that much about extreme life. I don't. Maybe you guys do. Then if in that case, your list will be written pretty fast. Like 10 more seconds. All right, so I want to show you, here's a famous example of an extremophile. This is the tardigrade, also known as the water bear. These things are very, very, very tiny, submicroscopic. In this picture, our water bear is sitting on a piece of moss, and these little dots are these little green dots that you see on its moss piece are the individual cells. So you would need a really, really high-powered microscope to see this. Water bears can withstand temperatures from negative 324 degrees Fahrenheit, and I don't even have a frame of reference to give you an example of how cold that is, up to 304 degrees Fahrenheit, so like oven temperature, right? They don't need water, they don't need oxygen, they can survive in boiling alcohol, and they can withstand up to 10,000 times radiation as humans. So this is an example of an adorable organism, but also a thing that we call these, let me write this down, extremophiles. Extremophiles. They love extreme environments. So on my list, I was thinking about the water bear. So I have very hot or cold conditions, temperature, no to low water, no need for sunlight, no, or dark for that matter. Like for humans, it's important for us to have that circadian rhythm, some periods of lightness and periods of darkness. No oxygen, and then can live in acidic or basic environments. All right, did you have any of these on your list? All right, so when we look at our two lists, our conditions for familiar life and our conditions for extreme life, we might notice that the conditions for normal life fall right in the middle of our conditions for extreme life, right? Like for humans, we can't stand hot or cold. It needs to be in the middle. We can't stand no water, or we're not aquatic, so it needs to be right in the middle. We can't stand all sun or all dark, so we need a little bit of both. And um, so conditions for normal or familiar life fall right in the middle of these separate sides of these extremes. But why do we even care to study extreme life? Well, for one, understanding how life survives in extreme environments on Earth helps scientists hypothesize about how life might exist or not on other planets or moons. And some of the conditions that we think of as extreme on Earth are actually quite normal on other planets or even in certain places on Earth, right? So like we think it's, the lack of oxygen. If the Earth suddenly lost all of its oxygen, that would be weird here, but there's never been any oxygen on the moon, right? So it's normal for the moon. Also, knowing that life can survive extreme environments hints that there may be forms of life on other planets. And we can use all this knowledge to create habitats and equipment that will help us explore life on other planets. Very much like if you ever saw the movie, oh shoot, The Martian. right? So they had a whole habitat set up and the right equipment so that they could not only live on Mars, but they could explore the terrain as well. So for your assignment, I want you to look at this. I'm going to put up a photo of an extreme environment. And based on this photo, I want you to make a list of conditions that you hypothesize for these organisms, okay? So your assignment is what conditions are necessary for life in this environment that I'm going to show you on the picture. And it just needs to be a list. It doesn't have to be environment, anything fancy, just a list of at least five. At least 5 conditions. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to show you the picture. This is an aerial view of a hot spring at Yellowstone Park, and you can see that people can walk right alongside it, so they get pretty close, even walking over it at some point. And I'll tell you as a hint that the different colors around the outer edges of the pools are made by the different species of bacteria that live in this very, very, very hot, very acidic environment. And based on the photo you see here, make a list of conditions that you hypothesize that these organisms need to survive. So make a list of conditions that you hypothesize for these organisms. And maybe you want to, make different sets of conditions for different bands of colors. I don't know. But just give me at least 5 conditions that you think that you hypothesize for these organisms. Okay, that's your assignment. Thanks for hanging out with me for these hand-drawn notes. I'll see you next time.